Today is International Women's Day, and what better way to celebrate than talking to a woman? What's up, everybody, and welcome to CrossFire Faith and Gaming Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Russ Dornisch, alongside my co-host, the Reverend David Petty.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? Excited to be here again.
Yep.
As always.
Sorry,
I botched the intro. All right, go ahead. Just keep going.
You're good. You know, today is a very special day. Today is International Women's Day, and for our Lent devotion study today, we are going to be speaking to a very special guest, the Reverend Angie Dornisch. Hello, Angie.
Hello. Thank you both for having me on the podcast. It's
nice. Of course. Yes. And if you guys didn't already notice, she does have the same last name as me. No, we are not siblings. Yes, we are married. Which may come into questions later on to make this podcast / devotion even better. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to David because he's going to have some questions for Angie about her faith journey, about being a pastor, and what it's like, especially here on International Women's Day. David, take it away.
All right, so my first question, the question I'm not going to ask, I was wondering, what's it like to be married to a guy who's like podcast famous, like Russ, but we'll save that for later. First, I just want to ask, tell us a little bit about your journey, especially I think women pastors have such a unique journey, and definitely in the church and in ministry. But why don't you just share a little bit with us about your journey to becoming a pastor and anything you want to share with that?
Yeah, thank you. So I grew up in the evangelical conservative church in a Reformed tradition that did not ordain women to be senior pastors. Very rarely they would ordain women to be like associate pastors in more of a director role. But I grew up with a lot of folks in our church family, in our church community, telling me that I had gifts for pastoral ministry. And so it was interesting growing up in a church where there was kind of conflicting talk with this theology of, well, you can't really be a pastor, but you should be a pastor because you have the gifts and graces. And so I remember kind of being at Denver Seminary, where I went and got my Master of Divinity degree, going on somewhat of a Goldilocks journey to figure out what denomination, what faith tradition would be best for me, with my views, and then obviously for me as a woman. There were several women growing up at my home church that were incredibly influential to me. And they were not ordained, but they would speak from the pulpit. Sometimes they would guest preach, which was allowed. And I do want to say, for me, I totally realize the importance of representation and representation for the younger generation to like visually see and to kinesthetically experience something. So for me to see women in these positions in the church, that was like very, very impactful in my faith journey. And I knew I wanted to get ordained. I knew I wanted to become a clergy person. Being a women's director is great. Being a children's director is great. But I really felt the call after college to kind of go all out, be a senior pastor, solo pastor, definitely something with more leadership and preaching. And so I remember meeting with a lot of really amazing United Methodist clergy women in the Denver area. The first one was Claire McNulty Drews. She was the pastor at the time in Lyons, Colorado. And she is so gregarious. She's compassionate. She's fierce woman for social justice issues. She actually brought me to preach at her church at Lions UMC to talk about sex trafficking, because I was working at a safe house for women coming out of sex trafficking, and she had found me just online and asked me to come and preach. And so I remember her saying, you should be Methodist. You should be Methodist. There's so many women in our conference that are these like amazing female pastors, and you can come and join our tribe. Second woman that I met was Melanie Rose, who at the time was a district superintendent in our denomination in the kind of Colorado Springs area. And she was so affirming for actually years of my different gifts and graces. And she was the one that really taught me about the kind of history and the tradition of the United Methodist Church, and how our tradition is fairly egalitarian and had been egalitarian even from way back when John Wesley grew up. He had such honor and respect for his mom, Susanna, and really put her as a huge faith leader, an amazing preacher that she was. And so, she kind of told me about the history of women like Sojourner Truth, and others that had just really paved the way. And that really was so encouraging to me to know that in 1956, the United Methodist denomination allowed full ordination rights for women at General Conference. So I know in other kind of more conservative denominations, there's still a long road to go for women. Some women can be like deacons or serve in more of a diaconal ministry. But I'm really, really thankful. And I feel like the United Methodist Church is a great fit for me because it allows me to use the gifts that God has given me to lead and to serve. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I've got one other question here, and Russ, I don't know if you have a follow-up to that first question, or if you want to follow that up after I ask the second question here. But the second question, I guess, is really more about gaming and games. And I know from the times we've talked before, you're not a huge gamer. You're not you're not trying to platinum everything like Russ is. But perhaps as a person just kind of adjacent to games, I was wondering if you've seen a change, especially, from a woman's perspective, in representation in games. And then also, do you play any games? And if so, what kinds of games do you play? And I don't know. I think it'd be really neat for people to hear from somebody who's, in your shoes to talk about your experience with games.
Yes. So I grew up playing Sega Genesis games, specifically like the Disney games like The Lion King in the 90s. Aladdin was a fan favorite. I think it was like Mickey Mouse's King of Hearts. I also remember there was a Sega Genesis Home Alone game. Those were all ones that I can remember. I just loved playing Little Mermaid, all those. So definitely grew up really, really enjoying video games. And then it's interesting because once I started dating Russ about 4 years ago, I remember a very specific moment in our early years of dating when he was sick, and I went and brought him soup. I was on break from work. I came and brought him soup, and he was playing this video game. And Russ, you would know the name. I don't remember, but
it was Horizon Zero Dawn because it was the week that it came out. It was release week for Horizon Zero Dawn, which is David's favorite game, his wife's favorite game, very popular on our podcast. And
it really kind of changed the way that I viewed video games, at least in the 21st century. For me at that time, I had really not played any games except for Candy Crush on my phone. I have been playing Candy Crush solidly on my phone for probably the last 7 or 8 years. I love it. It's my favorite thing when I'm bored, when I'm traveling, when I used to fly on airplanes. I love playing Candy Crush and listening to a podcast. But when I met Russ, the interesting thing for me was because I love movies and I love stories. I love a good story. I love So I guess my eyes were really open to the world of video games, and again, sorry, forgive my ignorance. What are they called? The like Horizons. What is that called? The kind of video game.
Like kind of video game?
Yes.
Well,
I would.
that one's called an open world game.
There we go. Where you like
yes.
make decisions and you have more freedom to choose different things.
So it's kind of an
different
open world
storylines.
Action
RPG.
RPG.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we would call it.
Right, RPG. Okay, so all these I remember hearing you guys say, but yes. So for me, it's really interesting because if you grew up and it was like Sonic the Hedgehog and like Disney, Sega Genesis games, fast forward all those years to this game that I'm seeing, and like the visual effects and like the cinematography and everything in some of these games are like amazing. And so I really do understand why people would enjoy this, because it really is, it's so immersive. And the other game that I loved because it has the strong female character, what is it? And they're making a movie. They're making a movie about it, or maybe
a TV show? That'd be The Last of Us.
Yes. So
Another favorite on our podcast.
Right. Well, so I think a stereotype for a lot of folks is that video games are just games like the shooting games like Halo. They're games that, are more predominant. Like if women are in them, it's like Grand Theft Auto and women aren't doing really great things. That's kind of the stereotype that you hear of people who are not really familiar or comfortable with a more gaming world. But the interesting thing is, I can say, being married to a gamer and somebody who, like you guys are in this video game ministry, there is a lot of amazing representation of strong female characters in the games that I know, you two play, the games that I know the CrossFire community plays and enjoys. And so I do think that along with the rest of society, like we have come a really long way in a more, sense of a woman doesn't have to come in and be rescued, and a woman doesn't just have to come in and be like objectified, but like the woman could be the heroine of the story, which is really powerful.
So I'm going to go through just some fun things real quick. Let's lighten the mood as far as some like lightning round stuff to get to know the Reverend Angie Dornisch. If you can name them off the top of your head, either top 5 or top 3 favorite movies.
Ooh. That's hard.
Depending
I
on
love
what's
Orange
easier.
County. That's like the funniest movie. I would say Hocus Pocus is like, that one is just like the best. And then, I don't know. Do you want to get, what's another one? Just love all Disney movies. Maybe
Mulan?
Inside Out.
Oh, that's right, Inside Out.
Oh, because I love joy and sadness. So yeah, maybe those would be the top 3.
Okay. Book that any young female seminary student should read.
Jesus Feminist by Sarah Bessey. Easy.
Oh, look at that. Okay, everybody.
So Sarah Bessey is phenomenal. Anything by Rachel Held Evans, I also, it's just critically acclaimed. They're the best. R.I.P. Rachel Held Evans. She's gone on to be with Jesus. But there's like this tribe of these like amazing. Can you like say BA on this podcast? Can you say that?
Yes, go ahead. You can say.
You can? No.
Just say BA.
Yeah, we'll say
BA,
spoiler warning.
Yes. You see these really strong women, and there's a tribe of them. And they have written a lot of books on women in ministry, because a lot of them have come from really kind of more traditional denominations and grown up in places where they just kind of saw older men leading. And so Jesus Feminist to me was like everything that I had always felt, and I never felt like I had belonged, or I felt like these feelings that I was experiencing, I was crazy, and I was different. But it was literally like when I read Jesus Feminist, I was like reading about my own story and myself. And it was the first time it was like in my early 20s where I felt like I was really seen. And yeah, that was just such a powerful experience. I have several copies of the book, but the first copy is just like filled and underlined and highlighted and just all those things. So
okay. Yeah. Jesus Feminist. Any females listening to the podcast wanting to dive deeper into feminist theology and just women in theology in general, Angie recommends it. So,
and I'm going to try to grab those as links. Angie, do you have any favorite places that you would recommend people buy these books from? Any particular source, or does it not matter? just for our link purposes.
Well, I would say another really good link for people who would like to learn more about egalitarianism. So women in ministry, kind of the biblical backing for women leading and teaching in the church is Christians for Biblical Equality, CBE.org. They have a ton of scholarly journals. They've got a lot of articles. They even got a couple of, books and things like that. But I mean, in terms of anything from Rachel Held Evans or Sarah Bessey, and then obviously others, I would just get it on Amazon. That's what I would do. But
okay, awesome.
So,
Russ, any other last minute questions? I know we probably need to wrap up here soon.
No, I do not have any more questions. You, David, you good?
I think I'm good. I just want to say again, thank you, Angie, for joining us on the podcast. And Russ, I'll let you close us out with any last minute announcements or last minute, tell people where they can find everything else about us.
Yeah, so thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for following along with the Lenten devotions that we have going on right now. Make sure that you guys check out our website at crossfirecast.com or crossfirepodcast.com, and you can find all the different ways that we are building community and bringing content to our community. Of course, the conversation continues over at our Facebook page. I'm sure we will have a lengthy conversation about this podcast later on. But again, thank you, Angie, for being on the podcast. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
And to the rest of you guys, keep playing games and God bless.
We'll see you out there on the internet.
Bye.